The Pittsburgh Pirates 2024 season is almost over. So what should we be watching for as the season comes to a close? We're going to discuss that on this live edition of Locked On Pirates.
You are Locked On Pirates, your daily Pittsburgh Pirates podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Locked On Pirates podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates, every single day. Today's episode, live, by the way, on YouTube, is brought to you by Prize Picks. Make sure you go to Prize Picks right now, download the app today, and use code LOCKEDONMLB and get $50 off instantly when you play $5. If you didn't know already, my name is Ethan Smith. I'm a lifelong fan of the Pittsburgh Pirates, and I channel that lifelong fandom into information for all of you every Monday through Friday here on the Locked On Podcast Network. And a few days ago, I did ask you all, what is one thing you want to see from this Pirates team for the remainder of the season? I also said that these would be a part of the show on yesterday. I was getting over a little bit of a cold yesterday. Still kind of am. So if you kind of hear some raspiness in my voice, that's probably why. But we're showcasing them today live. Welcome everybody that is here. Daniel Berry Sports Highlights. Hello. Harper Man is here. Do you think if we make it back to the playoffs, not saying this year, we'll have a Johnny Cueto-like moment because our fans are more rowdy than Philly can wish? We'll hit that one a little bit later, Harper. I'm going to get into some of these answers that I got from the Twitter question that I asked first, and then we'll do the live Q&A, and then I'll give some more thoughts about the state of things and how everything is going at the current moment. And again, channeling back to that question, what is one thing you want to see from this Pirates team for the remainder of the season? We're going to start with Dave Thomas. Dave Thomas, one of the lifelong listeners of this show. He's been here all the time. He's an everydayer. Shout out to you, Dave. He says he just wants to see them seriously try to win games, not like tonight. Now, reminder, that was on Wednesday against the Chicago Cubs when the Pirates were no hit. And he says that was not a serious attempt to win. I can agree with that. There was a lot about that game that I found very interesting. And we talked about it a little bit on the Pirates fan forum yesterday with Gary Morgan, Jim Stam, and myself. I was a guest on the show yesterday. I've been a guest on that show plenty of times. Go check it out. But I found it interesting that at the end of that game, the Pirates were getting no hit. Everything was out of proportion. They were down 11-0. And then they took out Brian Reynolds and Isaiah Kiner-Falefa for Billy McKinney, who, mind you, folks, was just designated for assignment today, not even really that long ago before I started the show, and Alika Williams, a guy that's likely not even going to be here next year. So very interesting that they decided to make those moves, and obviously we know what happened. But I agree with Dave 100%. I think you just want to see this team kind of find a way to just look more serious. Look like they want to win. Now, we're going to talk about more about that later on the show, but I just didn't really see that. Ron Southwick said lots of playing time for Henry Davis. So hopefully he can end the season on a strong note and they can better assess him. He needs to improve, but I think the way the team has handled him has absolutely hurt his development. Now, I've kind of pondered on this a lot about Henry Davis, and we all know the story about Henry Davis at this point. 2022 number 1 overall selection out of Louisville. Shout out Jim Rosati, who's a big Louisville Cardinals fan. And then you look at what everything else that has transpired since he's arrived. You know, he kind of struggles at the minor league level, but he still looked relatively good enough. They bring him up, but they don't bring him up as a catcher. They bring him up as a right fielder. It didn't really work all that well for him out in right field at all. So then you wonder, okay, what's going to happen now? And he's not really hitting the ball at the MLB level. You're starting to get a little worried about the offense at this point. But I do think that Joey Bart is a very good example of what we can expect possibly from a guy like Henry Davis. Joey Bart, much like Henry Davis, was a former number 1 overall selection, a former top 5 selection to the San Francisco Giants, was slated to kind of be the guy to take over for Buster Posey, just never really amounted to much in San Francisco, but now still relatively young, arrives in Pittsburgh, and all of a sudden here we go. Now Joey Bart's starting to hit the ball. He's kind of cemented himself as the starting catcher on this team. So, yes, I agree that the development of Henry Davis has had some effect on everything that has been going on with him so far, but I still remain patient with everything that I'm going to see. Pirate Queen Banshee also says, you don't have to use this. It's just on my mind. Since there's an admission from Ben Cherington of screwing up Henry's catching technique by putting him in right field, give him ample playing time behind the plate. They owe him that. So kind of the same thing. And Mark Kress even says, I agree with the Queen. Davis needs to have a minimum of 15 starts behind the plate. Mine is York, a minimum of 15 starts at third base. Pirates must get more offensive production from that position. Don't wait until next spring. Start now. Play them now. Interestingly enough, today, maybe even during this live, we'll find out more. The Pirates did, of course, activate Joey Bart off of the IL. They then, of course, designate for assignment Billy McKinney. So now you have 38 guys on the 40-man. So maybe we start seeing a Nick York or a Billy Cook, guys that, you're going to have to put on the 40-man at some point anyways. You're going to have to get these guys up here and see what they can do, because you gave away real assets to get Billy Cook and to get Nick York. So these are things you want to see. You want to see these guys come up now when the games really don't matter all that much. I still think they do because of course, some other things that may come up in these comments. But at the end of the day as well, why not figure out what you're going to get out of these guys rather than playing the Billy McKinneys or the Alika Williams of the world? I mean, even bring up a guy like Matt Gorski or bring up a guy like Joshua Palacios again, who you're also going to have to make a decision on. And even a Leover Peguero, a guy that is about to be going on his fourth year on the 40-man roster, and you still don't even really know what you have in him, and he's 23 years old. That's the kind of guys that need to be playing right now. You don't need to be seeing Yasmani Grandal. You don't need to be seeing, some of these guys that just aren't going to be here, like a Michael A. Taylor. What's the point? Like, what is the actual point of having these guys on the roster? But we're going to get more into that later as well. 9 Mile Run, also known as Dave Tarrant News, says he just wants to see smart baseball. No more boneheaded plays on defense. No more lollygagging out of the box on long flies. Play like a team. I'd like to see Shelton fired and an interim coach take over so Pirates can get started on the process of a new coaching hire. That is going to be a large part of the conversation going into the offseason, depending on when a decision is made about who is going to even manage this team next year, because Derek Shelton and the coaching staff have been publicly ridiculed. They have been put under the bus for a rather long time now this season, because almost every single decision that you've seen the Pittsburgh Pirates make this year, almost every time, Derek Shelton's name is attached to it. So he is basically being held responsible for pretty much every single decision that you've seen from the Pittsburgh Pirates. And this is going to be, no doubt, a topic of conversation, because you look at what this team has done since Derek Shelton has been here. They obviously have not amounted to what they wanted to amount to, especially this season. And I gave him a pass in 21 and 22 because he just didn't really have talent. Well, now you do. You have Paul Skeens. You have Mitch Keller. You have Jared Jones. You have O'Neal Cruz. You have Brian Reynolds. You have real talent on this roster, yet it feels like it's just not amounting to anything. And that's frustrating, especially as fans. That is frustrating for us because we want to see this team take that next step, even if it doesn't mean the playoffs. We want to see them take the next step and be competitive at this point in the season. We have not seen that in a very long time. It has been almost too long since we've seen the Pittsburgh Pirates in a competitive spot in September. And it's frustrating. It really is. It is a frustrating spot to be in. And a lot of you are still frustrated about it as well. And we're going to continue to talk about what to watch for as this season comes to a close, what you guys want to see on the Locked On Pirates podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Ibotta. Download the free Ibotta app to start earning cash back and use code LOCKEDONMLB, because Ibotta is a free app that lets you earn cash back every time you shop. You can earn on hundreds of items from groceries to beauty supplies to even toys for the kids. So you can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. The average Ibotta user earns $256 per year. That could cover the cost of an entire shopping trip, that flight you've been eyeing, or the fancy dinner you've been craving. Other apps give you points that don't amount to much. With Ibotta, you can earn cash back that you can withdraw to your bank account, PayPal, or even gift cards. Simply add offers in the app, upload your receipt, and voila, the money is yours. You can save on over 2,400 brands and shop at over 1,000 retailers, including your favorite grocery stores, Lowe's, Macy's, Sephora, Best Buy, and more. So it's time you join the over 50 million users who use Ibotta to earn cash back every time they shop. Right now, Ibotta is offering our listeners $5 just for trying Ibotta by using the code LOCKEDONMLB when you register. Just go to the App Store or Google Play Store and download the free Ibotta app to start earning cash back and use code LOCKEDONMLB. That's IBOTTA in the Google Play or App Store and use code LOCKEDONMLB to start saving money today. And welcome back, everybody, to the Locked On Pirates podcast, this live edition of the Locked On Pirates podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates, every single day. After you listen to this show, make sure you listen to Locked On MLB with Paul Francis Sullivan, a.k.a. Sully, bringing you all of your news and analysis with everything going on in the world of baseball as October approaches. Don't forget to drop your questions in that comment section because we'll be getting to them here in just a moment. But what to watch for as the season comes to a close? We're continuing to get all these Twitter comments about it. Neil Corzon, still on the Henry Davis thing, says Henry Davis figures something out and the relievers gain value. So he wants to see this bullpen kind of come out of its shell that it went to in August that really took this team out of any contention window. And I completely agree there. I think you kind of saw that a little bit in that Chicago Cubs series and even a little bit in the Cleveland Guardians series as well, where you kind of saw this bullpen finally come into games and just shut things down. You especially saw that in the first two games against the Chicago Cubs. You kind of saw it even a little bit yesterday against the Washington Nationals outside of Joey Wentz, but it's all coming together. That's what you want to see. You want to see everything come together. Even if it is a little too late, you still want to see it happen just so you can see what that product looks like, especially when you're talking about your bullpen. And I think you hit it right on the nose there, Neil, that you have to do that. Justice says, I want to see Nick York and Billy Cook. They've earned it. And more so on not even the fact that they've earned the opportunity to get that opportunity at the MLB level. I just think at this point, with what you traded away to get these guys here, almost is of more importance than what they do, because you have to give them an opportunity. You have to put them on the 40-man roster, or else you're just going to look really, really, really dumb. I'm just going to be honest. You really are. You're just going to look really stupid if you don't do that. And Nick York, I think of the two, has a little bit more upside. Billy Cook is already about to be 26 years old. So not a lot of time to really figure that one out, although he is still a very controllable player from a system in the Baltimore Orioles that has been producing talent like nothing over the last couple of years. So yes, I do agree. You want to see these guys come up, and I would love to see it because, again, if you're going to add them to the 40-man anyway and potentially have them as contributors for 2025, wouldn't you at least want to give yourself a small idea of what these guys are going to be able to do? I think that's a perfect way of looking at it. Rich just says, quality wins, no boneheaded mistakes, and Skeens winning Rookie of the Year. Well, I talked about that on Tuesday's show, so go listen to that. Ben's number one hater. I wonder what Ben he's talking about. Seriously, wonder what Ben he's talking about. Says, showcase the ability to fire the general manager and show willingness to pay four guys to do two jobs in 2025. Well, I mean, at the end of the day, I let people evaluate things how they want to evaluate them. I'm not really going to sit here and tell you how to think. That is not what I'm going to do. We all watch this baseball team every day. We all watch them play. We all know what's going on, but we're able to formulate our own opinions and our own thoughts about it. As far as Shelton goes, which I'll just add this, Darren, Evan says, fire Shelton. As far as the coaching staff is concerned, look at the evidence of what you have from Derek Shelton, from an Andy Haynes, from an Oscar Marin. Look at what you have and make your inference there. If you think that they haven't done enough and they need to go, that's fine. If you think that maybe give them one more year to figure it out, I think that's fine too. Now, with what's happened over the course of the last month and change, I do think my stance on this has changed. I was a guy that was basically saying, hey, Derek Shelton, he has his first real team now. Let's see what he can do. Through 65% of the season, the Pirates were in the playoff team. They were a playoff contending team as far as getting a spot. Not saying that if they got there, they would contend. But they were there at the All-Star break. They were there at the trade deadline. That's exactly why they went and got Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, Jalen Beeks, and Brian De La Cruz, and Nick York, and Billy Cook. Because they looked like they were in a prime position. And then after that loss to the Houston Astros on trade deadline day, mind you, it just kind of felt like the wheels fell off against Arizona, against San Diego. And that's exactly what happened. And the wheels just continued to fall off when they played the LA Dodgers. And they played teams that really, at the end of the day, are just better than them right now. They just are. But for what you're offering as a coach, as a manager, your sole job as the manager of the team is supposed to be to put the best players out on the field that you have on any given night and go win some ball games. I don't know if Derek Shelton has shown a willingness to do that. Because, folks, again, look at the evidence and make your own inference. How many times this season, if we went into a third or fourth game of a series with a chance to either win or sweep the series and made fun of the lineup? I mean, it's happened quite a bit. And it's something that gets very frustrating because when you break it down, and I think, you know, this goes back to what Harper Man said earlier. Do you think if we get back to the playoffs, we'll have a Johnny Cueto-like moment because our fans are more rowdy? I mean, I feel like at that point, it's going to be interesting when they get back to that point, if they do, because of stuff that we've been dealing with like right now, where you look at a team that has a Jared Jones, that has a Paul Skeens, that has a Mitch Keller, that has an O'Neal Cruz, that has a Brian Reynolds, a team that, again, earlier this season, and as early as about a month and change ago, was, in theory, competing for a playoff spot. So they got this close, it felt like, and then the wheels fell off. So who do you blame for that? Who do you throw the blame at for something like that? I really find it hard to say that you don't throw all of your blame at the one constant, which has been the head coach. I apply this constant to being a Los Angeles Clippers fan. I have a Clippers jersey right there off camera. I've been a lifelong LA Clippers fan. And when Doc Rivers was there, Doc Rivers is a phenomenal head coach in basketball, different sport. But no matter how much they changed the team, no matter how much things changed, they couldn't figure it out until Doc left, and then they eventually got to the conference finals for the first time in their history, thanks to a new head coach and a new style with pretty much the same players. So you're not going to fire the players. You're not going to fire Brian Reynolds. You're not going to fire Paul Skeens. You're going to fire the coaching staff. And at this point, it's a lot of likelihood that happens. Scratchy Chan, before we go to one more break, says, that spoiling our division rivals' chances for playoff spots with a win today. The Pirates may essentially knock out the Cubs. Next up, the Cards even show pride by knocking out the Royals or denying the Yankees for a division title. That goes back to what was being said earlier about trying to win games, because for some of these teams, these are still meaningful playoff games pretty much for these teams, like the Yankees you mentioned, like the Royals. So yeah, play spoiler a little bit. Go in there and beat the Yankees in Yankee Stadium at the end of the year if they have a chance to win the AL East. Go in there and beat Milwaukee. Go in there and beat the Royals. Go beat Seattle or St. Louis and Cincinnati and have a good ending to the season. I like that thought process a lot because that's how you should be thinking. The season isn't over. It is, realistically it is, but you still got 20 plus games to go. Finish them strong like you did last year with a lot less, which we're going to touch on that here in just a moment. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB and get $50 instantly when you play $5 because one Caleb Williams passing yard gets you one win on your block on Prize Picks every week in September. That's right. Only 1 yard gets you an automatic win every football weekend in September. Folks, that's 4 weeks of free wins. And you can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. Prize Picks is the best way to get the action on sports in most states, including California, Texas, and Georgia. And Prize Picks is the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy so that your Prize Picks lineups stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. If your player leaves in the first half and doesn't return, Prize Picks keeps your picks alive. And also don't forget that baseball ain't done. You can bet on O'Neal Cruz homers. You can bet on Brian Reynolds hits. You can bet on Paul Skeens strikeouts. You can do all that on Prize Picks. So download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game. Alrighty, folks, and welcome back to the final part of today's episode of Locked On Pirates here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Harperman said, I'm looking for what the Steelers magic every year, a winning season, 81-81. Could happen. You know, anything can happen. Look at what the Braves did that one year in September when they just came out of freaking nowhere. Difference is the Braves had a little bit better of let's say a core foundation than what the Pirates have. But what's very interesting about this Pirates team right now, I find it interesting that people at this point are very frustrated. And we are. I mean, you look at this team and what they've done, even in my lifetime. I turn 26 next month. What they've done even in my lifetime, they've had 4 winning seasons in 25 years. Kind of nuts. Made the playoffs in 3 of those 4. And I think that the frustration, especially among the fan base, even including me, boils over when this team just feels like it doesn't really have a direction. And I would even argue that despite everything that we've watched in 2024, I think the arrow is up. And I've said on this show before that 2025 was the first real year where you could look at the Pittsburgh Pirates and talk about them winning the NL Central, being a playoff team because of the pieces that they have or that I projected that they would have, like a Paul Skeens, like Jared Jones, like the guys I've mentioned on this show. But, and I know that a lot of people like to preach this, I don't, but it's year 5 of this with this current group, Ben Cherington, Derek Shelton. It's year 5. And it looks like you're staring down another losing season. This would also be the 3rd time, excuse me, In 4 years that the Pittsburgh Pirates have had a losing streak in the regular season of 10 games or longer. Which effectively, if you even want to go thinking about last year, took them out of the postseason last year also, when they lost to Milwaukee and Chicago 9 times in a row. So in back-to-back seasons, you've had a chance to keep yourself in the postseason, or at least in the conversation. Last year, it was catching the Brewers and Cubs because they were right there with them. This year, it was San Diego and Arizona. Guess what? They were right there with them. And they crapped the bed both times. Due to different reasons, of course. But as I said earlier, what is the main constant between them? It is the coaching staff. And when stuff like this happens, 2 years in a row, mind you, you have to start thinking something has to change, right? Something about what's going on isn't working. You know? So what's the deal then? What do you have to do to change things? What do you have to do to make things work? What do you have to do to continue to move forward? Right? What happens when the Pittsburgh Pirates, maybe even going into next season, have an issue with the same thing if they keep everything the same? Right? What happens then? Well, at that point, you start to consider, is this ever going to work? And Harperman says, I'd also like to keep Rowdy and find out if Bednar's staying the closing pitcher next year. I think Bednar will. A lot of this season with him was just injury-based, truthfully. And yeah, that stings to say, but they really should have put him on the IL when the season started. But really the root of what I'm saying about this state of this team right now, the direction is up. The direction continues to go up. So, why not say this? If it's continuing to go up, but something still needs to change, then what do we do? And that's going to be it. Those are my thoughts for now. Thank you for tuning into this live edition of Locked On Pirates. Follow the show where you can find it on YouTube and all of your audio platforms. Make sure to follow and become an everyday listener because you guys are absolutely awesome and you listen to this show all the time. And folks, thank you so much. Have a wonderful rest of your Friday and weekend. We'll see you on Monday or maybe even Sunday.